You're right, it actually is nothing.
Somebody just kicked the light off. You check the plugs? There's...
Go ahead. That doesn't matter. That's just so who's ever doing a tape over knows what he's talking. We're looking, what direction am I looking there now?
West. All
right, looking west under the crawl space.
John put in 16-hour days, but his commitment to the JCs never faltered. He was soon considered the most valuable new member in the Waterloo chapter.
I think probably it's just John's personality. He was very ambitious and wanted to be loved by everybody and liked by everybody and accepted, and it was just his way.
Local JC President Charles Hill was impressed with John's charm and powers of persuasion. The JCs appointed him chairman of their membership drive.
And talk about a membership chairman that no holds barred. I mean, he just did everything he could do to get new members, and he did it. He did the job.
Gacy lured men into joining the JCs by inviting them to the Clayton House Motel, where he screened illegal stag films and hosted orgies with prostitutes. In one evening, he signed up 20 new members. John's sexual romps also carried over into his marriage, with the full participation of his wife, Marlene. After an evening out, they would often swap spouses with other couples. When John's sister, Karen, came in from Chicago for a visit, her brother and sister-in-law revealed their little bedroom secrets. The Waterloo JCs knew all about John's sexual escapades, but that didn't keep him from earning enough votes to win the JC vice presidency and being honored as their Man of the Year. By 1967, he was a shoo-in for JC president and the father of another child named Christine. Yet there was a side to Gacy that his family and cronies had never seen, an insatiable lust for teenage boys. One afternoon, while Marlene and the kids were away, John invited over 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, whose father was a JC and an Iowa state senator. Gacy asked the teenager if he had ever watched a stag film. When he said no, John set up the projector in his basement. He got Donald drunk to lower his inhibitions, then forced himself on the boy. Young Voorhees engaged in oral sex with Gacy. Afterwards, John hinted that he had mob connections back in Chicago. He threatened the teenager and paid him $50 for his silence.
The kid, over the next period of time, just was beside himself, couldn't do anything, did not go to the police right away, felt, as Gacy had said, that in fact nobody would believe him.
In March 1968, the teenager finally broke down and revealed everything to his family. His parents pressed charges against Gacy, who was arrested and charged with sodomy.
Why am I asking how long do you plan to take up residence here?
Well, I hope to be getting out sometime in May.
Well, good.
What's interesting about Gacy's prison experiences as a result of the sodomy charges is, firstly, he's released very quickly. His sentence was 10 years. He was out after 18 months. He was able to convince people that his behavior wouldn't be repeated. But within that 18 months, he rises to the top of the prison hierarchy, despite the fact, as a sex offender, one would have expected him to be at the bottom of the prison hierarchy.
To regain control of his life, Gacy became a model inmate, a chef, and even started a prison chapter of the JCs, once again being named Man of the Year.
Was there a lot of noise in the house with
Never.
other people, anything like that?
No. I had a habit of, I didn't like his friends, and I had a younger son that kind of associated with some of his lads, and one time I got to return to daughter that woke up, Dad, she says, Ronnie's got a friend in the house. And it was one of his employees, and I'd get a hold of Ronnie, I says, take that guy and get him out of here. 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to bring no friend into the house. And I put them both out. My son said, if he goes, I go. I says, then you go too with him. And they spent a night in the house. And I went there the following night, and I told John, I caught this one kid. I said, if I ever catch you in the house, I said, I'll break your neck for you. Because I just don't like him in there. You know, not 3 in the morning. And John says, you stay out of Eddie's house. Even if Ronnie calls you in there, you have no business in there. Because I've had a number of articles vanish in the house, and we have no idea where they went. I lost a $1,000 diamond ring. I got no idea where it went to. It could have been some of his weird friends that Ron would bring in there.
There's a misconception of what the house on Summerdale is. It's not a house where you work 9 to 5 and come home, and it's like a house where you live in. The living room was the private office section. One of the bedrooms was a terrarium. The kitchen was more like a fast food kitchen. We have always contended there's others involved. At the time of my arrest, there was 4 other suspects. 3 of the suspects that we knew that they knew then was Michael Rossi, David Cram, and Philip Paskey. all employees of PDM contractors, all with keys to the house on Summerdale.
And they had friends, Gacy says, and friends of friends, as he weaves for me an alibi. There was Michael Rossi, for one, who worked for PDM and actually lived there during the time of the murders. Gacy and Rossi socialized in the house with Johnny Zick, victim number 3, the night he was murdered.
I met him the night he was killed because I met him with Michael Rossi. I had a drink with the two of them, and then I left. And when I next seen the individual, he was dead.
Where did you see him?
Why didn't I say something about it? Because it wasn't my business, and I stayed out of other people's business.
Where did you see him dead?
In the house on Summerdale.
And did Rossi tell you who had killed him?
No, Rossi didn't say nothing. Rossi was sleeping on the couch. I just left.
And how did he get buried? Do you know?
He was buried in the crawl space. When I come back, he wasn't there. So, Walter, that's your guess as to who put him in the ground and that.
There's not one of them that didn't die that I'm aware of that didn't die through their own hands or through their own wrongdoing. If you want to say that I tempted them, put them in temptation, yes.
The ones that were killed with threats of violence or blackmail or shit like that.
Well, I remember there was a little guy who got into sexual things, and he wanted to get into bondage sex and stuff like that. But that was in November, but I don't know who the hell he was. He was a little shitty guy, a little short guy with curly hair. I think he was Italian, but I'm not sure.
I don't understand how the hell there could be 30 people buried in the house. I don't understand. I don't, like I said again, in 77 I was gone so goddamn much I was never home.
He would lay out the trench. All right, this is where you dig, this is where you dig. Don't vary from the path. And there was also comments about the time factor. He'd come down, see how I was doing. How's it going? Are we done yet? You done being down there?
Cram also rented the spare bedroom in his boss's house. He returned home one night and found Gacy drunk and dressed in his clown costume. Gacy invited Cram to join him for a drink. The men had a few Mai Tais. Then Gacy tricked Cram into the handcuffs.
And he's laughing, ha, 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 you know, just like a little kid. You know, and again, I'm standing there looking at a clown in a clown suit, laughing at me because I'm locked up. And he's like, poke me. Does it bother you? Huh? Does that bother you? Huh? So I told him, I said, if you don't take these off, I'm going to kick your ass.
The teenager then saw a side of his boss that few ever lived to tell about.
It was just like a light switch went off in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a thought. He just starts growling like a mad dog.
Gacy lunged at Cram and swung him around the room, shouting, "I'm going to rape you." Despite the handcuffs, Cram was able to push Gacy to the ground. He somehow managed to grab the key and escape to his room.
Police would have had no way of tying Gacy to a 19-year-old who disappeared barely a month later, except we've learned that this time he got careless, taking and then selling John Zick's 1971 Plymouth Satellite to Mike Rossi. Gacy and Rossi, other employees say, were like father and son. In December, Rossi was brought to the house on Summerdale to point out the location of holes he admitted digging in the crawl space. He claims to know nothing about the bodies.
So, Mr. Dorsch, you were telling us about, I was asking you, well, how come this is being so covered up? And you believe it's the connection to this pedophile ring?
Well, yes, and more.
Okay.
Okay. More. There's some local connection here. It's a big-time local connection. Okay. Like I said, the police didn't want any more bodies. John Gacy was successful and prosecuted for the death of 33 young boys and men. Okay. You can't. Imagine, as you're a man, I'm a man. You don't win every fight. Okay. You got to have some way to control people, or you got to have some help. All right? So at the time that Gacy got arrested by the Des Plaines Police Department, and I say, thankfully, for Joe Kozenczak, now deceased, he was the lieutenant in charge of the detective division in Des Plaines, who upon learning that the Peace Boy had been missing, reported missing by his parents, took on the investigation and started following Gacy around, and he put together, with his people, put together that case that wound up finding bodies under the house and others that were thrown into the river. Thank God for Joe Kozenczak, okay? Because these bodies he would have gone on for a long time, all right? Well, I met with Joe Kozenczak, all right? I met with him after Chicago, and maybe it was the dig we talked about was in '98. I returned in 2003, and I got involved in the Gacy thing bothered me, so I reached out for Joe, and he met with me, and we talked about the case. And one of the things he told me, and I asked him, did Gacy have help? He says, oh, yes, he did. And I says, well, tell me about that. He says, John Gacy learned from Dean Carell. Admittedly, he learned from Dean Carell. If you know who Dean was, he was responsible for 27 murders of young boys in Houston. Okay? And Dean Carell had used other young boys to bring back victims to his place where he would kill them. And he would even give the cars to these boys, and he would pay them money for bringing these boys. Gacy admitted that he learned from Carell, and he would prowl the bars where the gay community frequented. Okay? But he was getting a bad reputation on the street because obviously he didn't kill all of his people he got in the car or brought home. I mean, Jeff Rignall was a good example of that, the guy that Gacy dumped after torturing him in his home, sexually torturing him, and then he dumped. He didn't kill everybody, but he was getting a bad reputation. So Gacy, acting on what Carell did, he had two young men living with him. One was named Michael Rossi, and the other one was David Cram. Both were about 19 years old at the time that they were living with Gacy, working with Gacy, and so forth. Okay? Gacy was being followed. The police were talking to Cram and Rossi, and they had suspicions about their involvement. And when the bodies were starting to be found, they had all three of them in the police station in Des Plaines, in custody. Kozenczak said that he was sitting there at a desk or table with Terry Sullivan, who was a state's attorney assigned to the case, and they were working that case when suddenly a woman comes into the office and inquires of them, do you have my son, Michael Rossi, here in custody? And they said, yes, ma'am, we do. He's under arrest. And she says, if you do not release him, you will not have a job tomorrow. And they said, what? What are you talking about, lady? And she says, he is the grandson of Vito Marzullo. Vito Marzullo was the second most powerful politician in the city of Chicago at that time.
Okay.
So Kozenczak said, we wound up using him as a witness to what Gacy was doing, but we didn't charge them. But they had to let not only Rossi, they didn't just let Rossi go, they had to let Cram go too, even though he didn't have the clout that Rossi did. But if you didn't let Cram go, he could blow the whole thing.
Gotcha. Now, are these two guys alive today, Cram and Rossi?
Cram committed suicide years later. Rossi has been involved in other encounters with the police. He did time in federal penitentiary. He's connected to the Chicago outfit or mafia, as we used to call it. All right, his family and that. He went to prison, federal prison, for being involved in the outfit hits on owners of movie theaters and reception projections union. They were starting fires around the country in movie theaters and beating up operators of the projections. And he went to jail. But he's out. He's been out all this time, but he won't talk to anybody.
How many bodies ended up in Gacy's cellar that were from Norman's trafficking ring?
In Norman's apartment, investigators found pink index cards with 5,000 to as many as 100,000 names and addresses, names of customers, and the boys pimped out to them. Could Michael Marino's name be on the sex trafficking list? Homewood police now say they looked for the index card files and no records match. Like in Texas, it seems the list from Illinois has disappeared too.
I am wondering if there were names of Chicago politicians or high-ranking Illinois politicians that were on that list, and that's why this whole aspect of the Gacy case was suppressed.
A man with connections to a serial killer and a sex trafficker. Paschke, Gacy, Norman. Becker continues searching for missing documents to definitively prove a connection between the Delta Project and the killer clown to help end a mother's painful search for her son.
I would do anything, anything to have him. Just so I get to hold him one more time and tell him that I love him and that I miss him behind words.